On this upcoming Attractions, we got an interview with the filmmakers behind The Penny Black. Plus, we got a new trailer for Reminiscence and more. Also, our review for The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. All this and more on Midnight Double Feature. And we got a short one today, guys, but we're going to have a fun one. I'm here with Z-Dogs. Z-Dogs, how are we doing? I got to stop calling you. I'm calling you that to annoy you, but now it's annoying me, so I'm going to stop it.
It's so fucking... It's a little... I hate it. I hate it so much.
So what's up, Z-Unit? How are we today?
Oh my god, this is not good, man. I don't know what we're doing here.
I got a new one. Okay. We'll start again. And we're back here at Midnight Double Feature. Today I'm here with Lil Zoheb, upcoming rapper from Western Sydney in the area. Lil Zoheb, how are we today? We're going to have a new one every week.
I wish I could download like hanging up sound effects. Like, doot, doot, doot. I'm good, man. How you going?
I'm good. So yeah, E3 just wrapped up on the today as we recorded. We're a bit of gamers ourselves. Anything catching your interest, my friend?
Not really. Probably just Battlefield, I think. Battlefield 2142. Yeah, I'm not a big, like, I don't love indie titles. Like, I don't know. I like a game with money behind it. So Battlefield 2142, because it's been a while, I think, since the last Battlefield game. I'm just kind of like really, really itching for one, and one that actually takes place in sort of like a more modern setting. The last one was Battlefield 5, Battlefield 1 before that. So, as much as I love my history stuff, I love seeing a bit more of a modern setting. I am really keen for Starfield. Starfield is a giant exploration game by Bethesda, who did the Fallout games.
Is that Xbox exclusive?
Yes, it is, because Microsoft bought that studio. So now they have a bunch of like first-party studios.
There's been a lot of conversation about, and I think it's just trying to keep backlash on the low about, people who are big Bethesda fans been upset about them being bought by Xbox, and they said, well, some titles might be multi-platform, but every time I hear that, I'm like, bullshit. They're not forking out all that money for Bethesda just to, let Nintendo or PlayStation have a bite of that pie. I gotta say, man, I'm a big fan of E3. I follow it every year. Even back in my days.
It crept up on me this year. I was like, oh, we're in E3 now. Cool.
Well, yeah, but this one felt really weird because PlayStation wasn't a part of it. Generally, if there's someone missing, it's Nintendo, and that's because they'll do like their direct like the day before. But not having PlayStation there really felt weird because they have so many massive titles in development. And yeah, no God of War, no Horizon Zero Dawn. It felt really weird. And then you got Xbox with probably their best presentation in 5 to maybe even 10 years. For once, just loaded with first-party titles. But a lot of the first-party titles are new IPs. So sometimes, I don't know about you, but it's hard for me to get hyped. It's different to movies. When I see a new movie, I'm like, fuck it. When I see a new game, it's like, oh, I got to learn about all these characters and I got all this other shit. And like, unless there's like a really awesome mechanic, it's hard for me to get hyped. So Xbox, like, it was funny. They had a weird present. It was a bit weird seeing all these first-party titles and new IPs, so much of it. For the exception of Halo and I guess Battlefield, but like they probably took the cake for me this year. Even Nintendo disappointed a bit. They had a new Metroid title, but it was the 2D one. And I don't know, what was that? Their biggest thing was like a Tekken character being in Smash Bros. Which, don't get me wrong, I love Smash Bros, but I'm not going to lose my shit over that. It was a fun year, man. I think the biggest takeaway though for me, did you see this Guardians of the Galaxy game that's in development?
Yeah, I tend not to get excited about licensed games. Like it's from the guys who did the Avengers game, and that was everyone saw.
It's the same publisher. Yeah, it's the same publisher. It's different developers, I believe. What I'm stoked
Are you sure
for,
about that?
pretty.
Let me double check that. I'll fact check you. Just keep talking.
I'm gonna say I'm 60% sure. I'm not fully. But yeah, I could be wrong. But at least this is a single player driven game. You control Star-Lord. They never made any mention of controlling any other characters. It'd be crazy if there's no multiplayer element to it. So I'd imagine there must be. It seemed like a big missed opportunity if there's no multiplayer element. But they only focus on single player content, which you think is a huge improvement over Avengers. Have you pulled up anything yet?
Yeah, it doesn't look like it. It doesn't look like it was created by Crystal Dynamics, who did
Avengers,
the Avengers, and they did the Tomb Raider games as well. But look, yeah, I'm trying to find.
Crystal Dynamics is a great developer. They've done a lot of great shit, but I think just with Avengers, they would like let's make as much money as possible. Let's make it a service game.
That's right. This is Eidos Montreal, who did the Deus Ex games. So the have you heard of the Deus Ex?
I have. I never really played them.
And shit.
I know some of them were kind of celebrated. I think some of them were a bit more hit and miss, weren't they? I think. But I think
so. Deus Ex Human Revolution was amazing.
Yeah, look, I've got some I like how they've got a little bit of like the teamwork aspect in here. The graphics look pretty decent. Even the Switch version looked all right. So I'm stoked on that. I think the other big takeaway or big standout, and this sort of bleeds into us for movie news, is did you see this new Avatar game they got going on?
Yeah. Like, you know what? An Avatar game, I mean, I think it would probably work better as a game than a movie, to be honest.
Possibly.
I mean, like, think about everything that you can do, and, you can kind of get away with the story, sort of like narrative, the narrative issues that the movie ran into, right? Because it was so, it kind of got dinged for being a little bit, not fresh, a little bit stale.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the you can kind of get into mechanics about it, like, military shooter you can get into, because it's basically like a big kind of like Rambo. Oh, sorry, not Rambo.
Pocahontas. Heard some people say.
I know a lot of people say Pocahontas, but I mean, like, it's a story as fucking old as time. I mean, it's basically the British arriving to Australia and battling the Aborigines, right? I mean, like, that's what it is. Like, it's every story about invasion. So, I think a game could possibly be good, and like the trailer for it wasn't too bad.
Yeah. A lot of people I've heard say, I've heard this for ages, that they had a Avatar game when the first movie came out. And that was actually, I think they had some sort of connection with the production team. They work closely together. And apparently it's like weirdly ambitious for a movie tie-in. Not saying it's fucking revolutionized anything, but it got like a lot of high praise back in the day. So there is a history of good games coming from this franchise. The coolest thing about this for me is seeing this is like, oh, so they're on track to putting the movies out. That's what this tells me. Because it's a game based off like what, a decade-old movie. You don't put this much effort in unless you're really serious about pushing out this franchise.
I don't really care about it. Do you care about it? Do you care about any of these movies? I mean,
you know what? 10 years will do that to you. 10 years without a sequel or anything will make, and you're hearing about it.
It's been 12 years.
12 years, even more. Like, that'll do that to you. But you got to remember, like, that movie changed cinema for about 3 years, and then we went back to 2D screens. But it was like people were saying their lives were apparently there was a story of some guy who killed himself because sorry, trigger warning for folks, but he said his life would never be as good as the Avatar movies. Like he like people were that obsessed with them. I
just want to quit. I want to quit this entire.
I know it seems crazy, but people really, really loved it. And then we forgot about it pretty quickly. So I think they are really they really want us to give a shit again. And I think this is the first step into seeing them do that. I'm willing to bet this game comes out either just before or just after or around the time the next movie does. And that's meant to keep the franchise in our mindset and shit. And then I think it's going to be like the Marvel movies or the Star Wars movies all over again. We're going to get a new one every year. And I just hope if they do that, I hope there are fucking memorable characters this time. Because I can't remember a single name of a single character from those movies. Can you?
Jake Sully.
There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, Avatar's biggest fan right here, Zoheb Ali. Thanks for joining us.
Neytiri. I mean, yeah, look, I'm pretty good at that kind of stuff. I mean, I'll remember it, but
yeah.
Like, as for my interest, not really.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
As for something we do remember, you had a pretty memorable interview recently.
Yes. So you're changing the structure around on me about what
I got
we
some
discussed.
segues.
So I'm just like,
oh, did we?
I'm just like, yeah. So I'm just kind of like, where are we? What are we doing? Because we shouldn't have been talking about E3. But anyway.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we also talked about. You know what? I'll bring it up later. No one will know.
You're so fucking good at this hosting shit. It's like you've not been doing it for 2.5 years. But no, yeah. So I was able to interview a couple of guys who created, one produced, one directed a movie called The Penny Black. And this is a documentary about, so basically what happens in this documentary, it's pretty fucking wild. This guy who lives, basically his neighbor is this big Russian dude. And the Russian dude goes over to his house with a bunch of stamps, a collection of stamps, and says, hey, I want you to look after these for me, please. I'm just going out of town. I'll be back. And the guy says, cool, no worries. I'll look after them for you. The guy's name is Will. And Will waits and waits and waits, and the guy never comes back. And Will looks into these stamps, and it turns out these stamps are worth millions of dollars. This is a true story. Eventually Will starts to question whether this guy was in the Russian mafia, because he's so hard to track down, he's so hard to follow. Will eventually starts fearing for his life. And one day, one of the books of stamps goes missing. So then you have the problem of, if I do get these stamps back, the guy's going to be like, where's the missing book? So, look, it's a really exciting documentary. It's on VOD. So video on demand on iTunes is where I watched it. And yeah, look, but here's the interview with producer Alex Greer and director Joe Saunders. Joe Saunders, Alex Greer, congratulations on the film, The Penny Black. And look, I got to say, I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. It's absolutely riveting. And look, this is a question that I never kick off an interview with because it's a little cardboard cutout question, but considering the premise, considering what The Penny Black is about, I really wanted to know, it's about the origin of the film itself. How did you guys come to be involved in the movie, and why did telling this particular story interest you guys? Because this is not something that you can complete in a year or like a couple months. This is a long-term story you guys are telling. So yeah, how did you guys get into it?
That's an interesting question looking at it, in retrospect, because if you had told me, and Alex too, probably, that if you guys start this, it's going to take 6 years, I don't know if we would have done it.
No.
Probably. No. Maybe if they said, and it won't cost you very much, maybe we would have, that would have changed our answer. But no, when we started, this was just meant to be a really short shoot. Like I met Will at a bar, I met Will at a brunch, and through Alex, and he told us this crazy thing that happened to him. His neighbor gave him $500,000 or bag of stamps worth $1 million, and then was left town for 2 weeks. And we started filming then. So we thought he was coming back, and it was more of a curiosity for me just to like film. And plus I didn't know if Will was really telling the truth. And it was just interesting to go over and see these stamps and interview Will. And he proved really interesting. Like I'd known him a little bit before. I had seen him out. And so I knew he was kind of like a quirky guy. And he always came off as being really smart. But when I put the camera on him, he was like, I don't know, there was something really kind of captivating about who he was and how he was performing for the camera, and put that on top of this crazy story. And I think that's what kept me interested during that initial shoot. And then obviously when his neighbor didn't come back, we just kept filming. And there were so many unanswered questions that we just kept filming. And every time we would uncover, an answer to something, it would create more questions. So we just keep filming, and we just kept doing that for 6 years. we could still be filming. Really, we just had to end it.
There's so much more story we could have still gone into. I mean, we had an idea planned out for this a while back that we would make it a sprawling like internet based series around these ideas of falling into different rabbit holes, because every stone we seemed to overturn led to its own rabbit hole full of like, entire feature length documentaries worth of material. So like we could still be out there following Bonnie Collins' story right now. There are like a number of crazy stamp collectors that we interviewed that had their own stories that we could have been following too. But yeah, at a certain point, Will even says it in the movie, like this thing needs closure. You need to end it at a certain point.
That's what I was thinking. I'm just like, how did you like? I mean, this isn't a question I have like in my little script or anything, but like, how did you guys, I guess, compose yourself and not, pull the strings that were being, like presented to you? Like, how do you keep? All right, let's stick to Will's story. Let's not go down any of these rabbit holes, because, like, man, I would just be dying to go down every rabbit hole that was presented to me, to be honest. So, yeah, that's crazy that you guys were able to keep on track like that.
It was difficult to keep on track. I mean, it was difficult to I learned how to make documentaries from NFL Films, and NFL Films, National Football League, American Football, and they. Their kind of creed was like fly on the wall, just like don't involve yourself. We're just like giving a lens to the audience, the football fans. And so that's how I learned how to make documentaries. So this was a real struggle for me in that method because it was being shot linearly. Like we were watching this unfold as it was going. And it wasn't like me being able to prepare questions to then interview somebody about something that's happened that we have existing archive footage for. It was all unfolding as we were going. So, Alex and I, just because we were in the danger of the moment oftentimes, or because we were in the intrigue or the mystery or whatever was captivating us as filmmakers while we're watching this, like we had to involve ourselves. Like it began with as much separation as we could from Will as he was doing this. But as the movie progressed, there was no alternative other than Alex and I step in and start pulling those strings a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely have a question lined up for that, actually, because, I mean, one of my favorite, I want to talk about how you guys decided to tell your audience the story, right? So one of my favorite documentaries of all time is Brian Fogel's Icarus. That just blew me away, obviously won the Oscar. And that follows a similar sort of narrative structure where everything's kind of like being unveiled as he goes, as he's shooting. And I definitely think the Penny Black echoes that. So did you guys, you guys made a conscious choice to tell us a story in a linear fashion, the way it was being revealed, as opposed to a more traditional documentary where we had all the information and the benefit of hindsight. So, was there ever a conversation where you're like, let's see how this plays out, and let's get us whatever information we have, and then make the documentary? Was there ever a conversation like that?
I don't think there was ever that conversation. I mean, I think we were, as we were going, after a year of filming, Serial came out, the podcast.
Yep.
And listening to that and going on that ride was so much fun that we started kind of seeing our story as something like that, even though that is more traditional kind of interview talk about the past type setup. But, the feel of it happening in real time and moving and the excitement of it and the tension, and like we really liked that, and we really realized we had something really unique in the fact that we were following the story from the ground. We're watching movies like Catfish, and Icarus hadn't come out yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were thinking this movie is we're following this action as it happens. Did we ever have that conversation of like going? I mean,
No. We always saw it as an asset from the get go. We in our earliest pitch materials too. We always emphasized the fact that we're on the ground with this story. We're watching it unfold. Like the audience gets to be witness to like instantaneous decision making and following the story in its most organic fashion.
That's
it became
easily
a
more
liability.
exciting. Easily more
It's
exciting.
totally more exciting. Yeah. So we saw that as a huge asset. Like we loved that we were on the ground as this was unfolding, especially given the nature of the movie where, you know, like lies seem to build on lies, on building on lies. But it became a liability at a certain point, most definitely, when we made this thing for no money, absolutely no money. And we, you know, tried to raise funds over the course of production. And, you know, we were successful in certain points, unsuccessful in other points. But as we were pitching it around, everybody wanted to know what the ending was. And that was a huge barrier to us getting financing or us getting early distribution, was people wanted to be sure that something was going to happen at the end. Something in particular was going to happen at the end. So being on the ground floor ended up becoming a bit of a liability at a certain point. But looking back at the way the movie cut together and the nature of the story that's being told, I don't think this would be nearly as intriguing told from hindsight. Like, it's a gift to be on the ground floor with a story as it unfolds.
Yeah, watching it, you know, like the way that you guys already made it. I don't think there's any other way you could make this. I mean, you know, it's just, again, you don't get to have audiences sitting on the edge of their seat if it's made, you know, with the benefit of hindsight, you know. So I think you guys did you knocked it out of the park. And Joe, this is something that you kind of like already got into, but you know, what's interesting to me and something that I rarely see in documentaries is the filmmakers intervening or getting involved in the events of the movie. So here, for instance, you got you guys speaking to Will's girlfriend, or you're out there searching for Roman. What was the conversation behind getting involved in the events? And did you guys ever kind of like take a step back and were like, whoa, all right, we don't want to get involved with this. Let's get Will to deal with this, or let's just not deal with it at all.
I mean, I think it came out of frustration and a little bit of anger, because at one very specific point in the movie, everything kind of points to Will might not being honest with us. And at that point, we felt a little bit maybe taken advantage of, or maybe just a little silly that Will was not on the up and up, and we started questioning everything he had been telling us. And at that point, the documentary, like, Will had been our protagonist up until that point. And at that point, he became our antagonist. And so we had to step in as the protagonist. You have to follow somebody's journey in this. And, you know, Will's journey is really exciting and interesting and multi-layered. But our journey was also exciting, interesting, and multi-layered. And, it was an organic decision. Like, it wasn't something that we planned out, and it wasn't something that we really debated that much about. I mean, we debated a little bit, but once we started questioning Will, there was no choice but for us to talk about it and let the viewer on the inside know that we were talking about it, because he was just so, shady.
Yeah, the goal was always to have Will be as active as possible, and driving the story as much as possible. But as you know, at a certain point in the narrative, that became impossible. And so it was just a choice of necessity that we had to get in there and move things ourselves.
It's kind of it's kind of one of those cautionary tales of like, once a dollar figure comes into it, you start to question people's motives. You start to question how people react to things. So yeah, no, I totally understand. And look, like, making a movie like this, you're often dealing with the unknown. And there were times when I personally was worrying for you guys and for Will, like for you guys' safety, rather. Like, was that a constant consideration for you guys? And how did you guys work to mitigate any risk involved? Because, you're dealing with, I mean, you're throwing around terms like Russian mafia, Russian underground, like talk to me about the safety of the crew, safety of you guys, safety of your subject, Will. What was going through your heads when all of this was playing out?
Producer.
Looking back on this, I just watched this again a night or two ago with some friends, and like, Joe, what were we doing? Like, what? Looking back on this, I put such blinders on my sense of reason and rationality in order to follow this story. Like, the story was good, and we got such a good taste of it so early on, and I think we took everything into account. Like, we had a board up in our office that had every possibility of everything that could go wrong. We got production insurance at a certain point too. And like, in order to get cleared, we had to submit to the insurance company a list of all of the terrible things that could possibly happen, so they know like what they're insuring. So like, we had a list, there's like a list that says like, oh, we catch up with a shady character and it turns out that they in fact are shady and we get stabbed, or we get shot, or we get our family in trouble. Like, we had to submit this horrible document. We called it the document that our mothers would never see. But we took all of that stuff into account and planned accordingly. And I think just disregarded like the stakes of it. I mean, Joe, you have a daughter now. Like, could you imagine staking out a potential Russian mobster again?
I don't think my wife would let me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think there was a certain amount of, I think to be a filmmaker in general, you have to have a certain amount of delusion. Like, this is a tough job. There's a million people trying to do it. You have to have delusion that you can be successful in this industry. And I think that played in our favor during this documentary. I mean, I think, you always shift your priorities in terms of, how they motivate you. And I think the priority for Alex and I for much of this was to get the best footage and get the best story possible. And lower on that priority list was safety. Mm-hmm. So we knew at times we were putting ourselves in danger, but you convince yourself of things. You convince yourself like, he's probably not in the mafia. He's probably, just some guy. And this is a collection he's had for generations within his family. He just wanted to safeguard it with a neighbor. And then maybe he got deported. Like, maybe he wasn't on the up and up in the United States and he got deported and he's just missing. And, maybe it's all that. And so you convince yourself of those safe stories in order to put yourself in danger. But yes, looking back and knowing what we know now, it was a lot of times I think we should have been a lot more afraid than we were.
Well, I mean, definitely my heart rate was on edge. I mean, especially the moment when, I don't want to give any spoilers away or anything like that, but like, there's a moment when Will reconnects with Roman. And that moment in particular, I was genuinely like, my heart was racing. And just that tension, that's the kind of tension that you get from like scripted dramas like A Quiet Place or something like that. So you guys did a phenomenal job, and I'm glad you guys came out unscathed. Yeah,
that moment in particular, that was, we like to talk about that and say, oh, it's such a coincidence. I mean, it was just the perfect shot for all of that to happen in, right? And you think about it, you're like, wow. A lot of people question the validity of stuff like that in this film because it seemed so perfect. Like, how could it be that perfect? But you have to remember, like, Alex and I were staking out that particular apartment, that guy, for weeks, trying to get his patterns to know where he was going to be. So we knew that he liked to park his car there. And we positioned our car to like be able to get that shot, mm-hmm. Will around looking out the window, and hopefully that's where he would come in. Worked out so perfectly and terrifyingly, because even when you're watching it, you don't get a sense of how close they actually were to us. If you're thinking about a road, we're parked on one side of the road, they parked on the other side of the road. There's only room for like 1.5 cars between where we were shooting and where they were. I mean, it was, my heart rate was racing during that too. I'm surprised I kept the camera steady.
No, you did a phenomenal job. And look, this is a question that I really kind of want to pose to you guys. And Joe, again, you've already partially answered this, so I'm wondering if you've got like a cheat sheet or something. But about Will and how he becomes somewhat of a unreliable narrator. He becomes your unreliable protagonist. he's also a bit of an unknown, a little bit like Roman, but not to that particular extent. So, when it's unfolding that Will might not be exactly forthcoming to you guys, how did that change your guys' direction? Rather, like because you've got your documentary focused on these stamps, but how did you guys not decide to follow Will's, I guess, uh, potential for dishonesty, rather, like go down that road?
Well, I think early on we decided to follow that. Like once he told us that his dad was a con man, that really changed everything for me because the stamps are interesting. Obviously, the Russian mafia or potentially Russian mafia neighbor, clearly interesting. But that all seems out of a movie somewhere. You get excited about that kind of stuff, mystery, stolen stamps, all that stuff. But I'm always more engaged and targeting the emotional, what's going on emotionally in the story. And that's something I could never really pinpoint because Will is so kind of, he's a little slippery. He's a little wishy-washy.
Pretty fluid. Yeah.
You can't really nail him down. So I was, when he said his dad was a con man, like everything made sense to me. Like I was like, oh, okay. And then when we got further into it and we learned that his dad was not, and when he told us, he was kind of like bragging about it, which is, I think his way of kind of, with his own blinders on of like talking about something that was his past, trying to act like it doesn't affect him, but it clearly does. And that became the journey of this documentary really is his relationship with his father. And how does somebody who had a con artist for a father that was arrested when you're 6 and deported out of the country, left his family in debt and in ruin, like, he hates his dad. How does that affect somebody put into this situation? So we really started following that story. And I was really, and Alex too, we were really much more interested in seeing the resolution to that story and seeing how the son of a con man like takes the situation. Because most people, everyone, you talk to, tell the situation to, the first thing they say is, oh, sell the stamps, like sell it, like they're yours. But Will didn't want to do that because he has this kind of odd, like, gravitational pull towards honesty, or at least being seen as honest. So
he's got a strong moral code. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. But does he, or does he want us to think he does? And, you don't know, but it's interesting, and you follow him to see what decisions he's going to make and how his father's relationship with him affects those decisions. And that was something that was really interesting from the get-go, from an emotional side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like it definitely, once we discovered that there's a missing book, and it really kind of like just brings a whole new dimension to the film. And you guys must have been, I guess as filmmakers, you guys must have been, I don't know, a little excited. There must have been like a little part of you that was excited to like, oh, hold on, we've got a new dramatic turn here. Although it's probably the worst thing that could possibly happen in the world, one of the stamp books going missing and what the repercussions of that were. As directors, as a director and as a producer, filmmakers, did you guys have that little spark of like, this is kind of exciting, isn't it?
That was the entire emotion. I think it was flipped in proportion.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Joe should speak to this, but I thought it was a gold mine when it happened.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly was, another question, which this whole story is full of, and finding the answers to was the whole journey of this thing. And but yeah, it was yes, it was really exciting. And
totally. Yeah, no, totally. Joe, you talked about this already a little bit, but I mean, with Will and, delving into his background, his backstory, I mean, like, it's traumatic. I mean, it's probably traumatic for a lot of people. So I'm wondering, when you have a documentary subject, how far is too far to prod? Like how are you kind of standing on the edge, but not going too far overboard into making your subject close off entirely, or just getting straight up angry at you for digging too deep, because again, it is a traumatic background that he has. So I'm kind of wondering how you guys, don't cross that line.
It's an excellent question. Will, in all the interview subjects, I've never been a part of something like this where your main subject it is also your kind of antagonist. So this was different for me, and the way we handled that was when I asked him very personal questions, because he's better friends with Alex. Alex would always step out of those shoots just because there's a familiarity there. If you have friends around, that maybe you won't say as much or you'll say it differently. And so I would talk to Will one-on-one about his dad. And I would always tell him, like, if there's anything you don't want to talk about, feel free not to talk about it. Same thing you did when we were opening this podcast. It's like, speak freely. If you don't want me to use something, I won't use it, And that's really the way to garner trust when you're recording anybody. And but I was really sensitive to it. Like, that trauma is real. And I think he had some blinders on about how that trauma was affecting him in his late 20s, which is when we started filming him. And I think through the course of this documentary, like, the biggest compliment I got about this whole movie was we were doing one of these interviews and Will was involved. And he said that this movie really helped him figure some stuff out about his past, which I didn't think was going to happen. Like, I thought he was cemented in his ways and that's just how it was going to be. But it seems like he's done a lot of introspection after this experience and has come to a better place with all of that trauma, which is great to hear. But all this to say, yes, I was very sensitive about it and, would give him plenty of space. And he often said, I don't want to talk about that, or, that's done. We're done. Or I'm getting hungry. Let's go get something to eat was usually his out. But he was tricky. We really had to keep him happy, bribed him a lot with dinner. There was that. Wrangling Will was one of the hardest things in this whole doc.
Joe's really good, just like interpersonally too. Like, you're really shrewd, I think, at like knowing how to motivate people. And I feel like you have shadows of like your dad's coaching in that regard. Like, you know how to get people to move forward, basically. That's it.
No, that's awesome. I mean, like, sometimes there were, definitely moments in the movie when I was like, how did, because he is talking about traumatic things, and I was wondering how you guys were managing him kind of like behind the scenes to be able to talk about such traumatic things, because it's not easy. Being dumped in a situation where you could potentially follow in your father's footsteps, unfortunately, that must bring up a lot of things. So yeah, I think you guys absolutely knocked it out of the park with Will. We're going to kind of like start closing it off here, but I kind of wanted to ask what you guys next projects were, because having spending 6 years on one project, on one film, I mean, how do you follow that up?
You don't do it again.
Lessons learned.
You find shorter stories to tell.
Fair enough.
Go ahead.
I don't know. I mean, we've both followed it up in weird ways. I'm in law school right now, so that's how you can follow that up. Joe and I also work on we created another a show that's in a totally different universe than this. It's called The Traffic Show. And it's a talk show that takes place in strangers' cars that I hijack and then set up a studio inside and get to know a perfect stranger while they're sitting in gridlock.
That's awesome.
It's fun. Yeah, I recommend checking it out. It's thetrafficshow.com to use this for another plug.
No, please plug away.
But we're also we're adapting this into a fiction feature, which Joe, I'll hand it off for you to talk about.
Well, I mean, that's about as much as we have concrete right now. We've had a lot of interest in turning this into a fiction feature, so we're working on that.
That sounds awesome. I mean, even just the premise of it just sounds amazing. And look, You guys have an open invitation to come back on to talk about that when that's all, when that's all solid. Alex, I don't know why you go to law school. I'm a lawyer myself, and man, like I don't know why you do that to yourself.
It was a bad quarantine decision. Some people decided to bake sourdough, and I decided to be a masochist.
Yeah, so. Well, I mean, look, I'm still in debt, and that's fun. That's fun for me.
Yeah, I'll see you at the bar.
Totally. No, it's good that I got to converse with a future colleague, so that's awesome. Look, this is something fun that we like to do with our guests. We're called Midnight Double Feature. That's the name of our podcast. So, my final question to all of our guests is, what's your favorite double feature? You had a Sunday afternoon or something, and you just kind of want to sit down there with a couple of movies. You had some time on your hands. If you ever found any time on your hands, by the way. What 2 movies back to back do you guys sit down with?
Gremlins popped in my head.
Oh, nice.
Gremlins and
a little bit of Joe Dante.
Oh, I'm a huge Joe Dante. I was going to say Explorers, but I didn't want to go too Dante.
Yeah.
I'll say Gremlins and The Game.
Ooh, Fincher. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Nice. That's awesome. That's a good pairing. Alex, how about you?
See, I think whatever I'm doing in life, I always would rather be watching There Will Be Blood. So I think I'd start with There Will Be Blood, and then if I want to chase it down, because it's a little, it's a rough movie, I think I'd chase it down with Airplane.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
My brother.
Wow, that sounds perfect. Actually,
that actually does.
Before.
Dude, that actually does. I mean, like you've got the heavy drama, and then you chase it down with some amazing comedy, dude. Me and my brother are always like forever quoting Airplane. We're always quoting "The white zone is for loading and unloading only," and it's just always, it's brilliant. But look, guys,
it's just lines on lines. Sorry, guys.
Totally. No. Look, guys, just again, congratulations on the film. It's absolutely, again, riveting from start to finish. You can feel your guys' passion for the subject coming through so plainly. And it's such a massive achievement. I've been recommending it to everybody for the last couple of weeks, having seen it. So look, it is available now on demand. You can stream it on iTunes and a whole bunch of other places. Yeah, guys, look, unless you have anything else to say, you want to head out of here?
I want to ask one question because originally researching the Penny Black, just Googling it.
Yeah.
Bar in Sydney or somewhere in Australia kept popping up, the Penny Black. Is that a popular bar out there?
Not that I've heard. That's interesting. The Penny Black bar. No, I don't think so. I mean, like, look, I consider myself to be pretty social. And unfortunately I haven't been social in the last in a year or so because of COVID, but the Penny Black, I'm gonna look it up. Because I think when I looked it up as well, when I looked up what the Penny Black was, before finding out that it was a stamp, I think I vaguely remember a bar coming up, but I don't remember it being in Sydney.
Might have been somewhere else.
Melbourne. It's in Melbourne.
Yeah, don't worry about Melbourne. No, don't go there. It's fine. Don't worry about
it. It's on Sydney Road.
Oh, there you go. Oh, man. Look, that's how there are rivals to the south. So, yeah. But look, guys, thank you again for jumping on for this interview. This was great. This was a blast. Highly, again, recommend check out the Penny Black. It's amazing. And Alex and Joe, you guys, again, have an open invitation to join us here at any time. To talk about your next project, just to riff about movies. Alex, if you want to talk about law school, let's go for it.
Good. Not on Zoom though. We need a safe space for crying.
Yes, we do. Yeah. Joe, again, I'm looking forward to seeing you guys adapt your next project into a feature film as well. That sounds awesome. So again, thank you so much for joining us, guys. This was awesome. I'll catch you guys next time. Thank you so much to Joe and Alex for joining us. Again, you guys have an open invitation to join us at any time. But yeah, it was a riveting interview. It was a riveting documentary and an amazing interview. We got into some pretty wild shit because there are moments in that documentary where they are trying to get like personal information out of Will, and Will has a pretty tragic backstory. So I'm like, one of my questions was, and I got the I got the whole. Oh, that's a good question. Which always makes me feel good. But one of my questions was, like, how did you toe the line as to how you got Will to talk about what he talked about? Because I can imagine that would be pretty traumatic to talk about. So yeah, really, really solid. So thank you so much to Alex Greer and Joe Saunders for joining us.
As someone who has worked on a lot of documentary content and stuff, those are hard questions to ask. I'm gonna have to listen to that interview myself and hear that answer because I could use all the advice I can get in that field. Segueing into something that we had agreed off air to talk about in the beginning, but we forgot because YOLO, and we don't have a lot of time with us here today. Man, we saw the very first episode of Marvel's new TV show on Disney Plus, Loki, and that's pretty exciting. It's a new Marvel show. What did you think of this one, my friend?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. So this episode, the first episode, is called Glorious Purpose. And I think there's a lot of, like, visually it looks stunning. It's amazing to see Tom Hiddleston back and, like, being given so much time to kind of, like, flex his muscles, because I think, he's got all of the muscles. Like, the guy's a fucking, he's so talented. But not only that, it's really exciting to see 2012 Loki, and it's really exciting or fun to watch Tom Hiddleston act 2012 Loki, because this character's come so very far in the last 9 years. So to see Tom Hiddleston just kind of, like, pull that out of his back pocket, that performance out of his back pocket so naturally, it's both entertaining and really kind of, like, impressive at the same time. I think Owen Wilson is great. He does a lot of the Owen Wilson kind of, like, things that we come to expect. Like, he leans in really close and he's saying, kind of whispers like this,
squints his eyes a lot.
Yeah, squints his eyes and shit. Like, asks a lot of questions.
Wow.
Yeah, we haven't got one of those, but I wonder if we will. But
it's coming.
So yeah, I really, really enjoyed this first episode. I think it's one of the strongest, probably the strongest first episode out of all three of the series so far. My kind of, like, not really a gripe, but kind of like a point of interest is, so with WandaVision was a very kind of, like, you need to have seen a few of these movies before coming into this, or at least be a little bit knowledgeable. So they kind of, like, dumped you in the deep end with WandaVision a little bit, whereas Loki is a lot more like, here's Loki's backstory. If you don't remember, this is what happened in 2012. This is what happened in Dark World. This is what happened in Endgame when he dies, Infinity War rather. So like it's interesting to see, and I'm not knocking it. It's just interesting to see what Marvel's kind of, like, strategy is with these shows, because this one is less so for Marvel diehards. This first episode was less so for MCU diehards. It was more so for, like, general audiences, which kind of intrigued me, because WandaVision, those first two episodes were not for general audiences.
I think I don't fully disagree, but I partially disagree, just because I actually wonder, even more than I did with WandaVision, is if you're not a Marvel fan, is it possible to get into this show? I honestly don't know, because there's the way it starts, they treat it like previously on Loki, and they cut to, like, Avengers, they cut to Endgame. And there's also flashbacks to Thor and Thor the Dark World. It feels like another episode of, this feels like season 2 in a way. And I guess that's the beauty of working within the Marvel universe. You have that. But, like, you go to something like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, that feels like its own entity. This, like, you can tell it is forming its own entity, like the TVA is what they're called, time travel, whatever the fuck they're called. They
time deviation. Wait, no, hold on.
It's a mouthful.
Time variant authority. Time variance authority.
Yeah. The I'll say the Time Lords. The Time Lords, they have their own unique world. They have their own unique thing. And I think that's actually the strongest thing about this episode is this has so much exposition to get through. And the fact that it doesn't constantly feel like a nonstop data dump is a credit to the writers. Like, this, the amount of shit they've got to set up it has so much potential to be boring. So every second that I'm enjoying, which is pretty much the whole thing, I think is actually pretty impressive. The fact that they still managed to have some twists and some dramatic moments where there gets a bit of action. They've managed to fit in some comedy, and most importantly, they got a lot of character work and emotional moments in between of these, like just squeezing that in between all this exposition and disguising the exposition as like, you know, plot points and character building. I think it's actually really, it's amazing how organic it feels, because on paper, I feel like it would not look organic. It's pretty great. It's great writing. I think great directing.
Well, this is
too.
the one I was most excited for. You know, we were talking about these shows when they were announced, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're like, you weren't that stoked for this. And I was just like, dude, this is the one I'm most excited for because of like the potential.
I think the concept of the show is the least engaging because, and that's not the show's fault, it's because I'm generally not into time travel shit. But then again, this whole episode, kind of like almost no real time travel does happen. I'm just scared that time travel show is going to get in a real formula. It's very easy for a time travel show to fall into formulaic plot, formulaic like structure for an episode, and most of the shows that do revolve around that do that. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for this show. But spoilers, the reveal of the villain being another Loki does raise a lot of questions. I think that makes it really interesting. Like that's a good way to grip me, you know. I think the show has a lot of potential, and especially with Tom Hiddleston, his performance is amazing. The moments where, excuse me, guys, where they make Thor: The Dark World relevant. The way that they show the death of his mother and how he reacts to that and how it sort of changes him. Like you do see a character grow, change, and learn throughout the episode. And that is just great character work. So massive shout outs to the writing team and the director and freaking Tom Hiddleston himself, because the way it all came together is really great. I'm also really keen to see more of Eugene Cordro, I think you pronounce. He plays Casey in the show. I've seen him in a few other shows, and I do think he's a pretty funny actor. I would like to see a bit more of him. I don't know if we will for sure, but he's cool. And yeah, I got one more big point I want to say, which I think is kind of funny. Falcon and the Winter Soldier sort of advertised its show as the buddy cop show. You know, these two, they don't like each other, but they have to work together. Like, we didn't really get that in the show. Like, we only got a few scenes right here and there. One episode in, and Loki has already beat Falcon Winter Soldier at its own game.
Hold on.
The chemistry between...
Maybe. That's so, like, I don't know.
No, because hear me out.
They're two very different things.
No, I mean, the vibe of having two characters who are butting heads a lot, who are on a journey together, despite their differences. Like, I feel like Falcon and Winter Soldier is really advertised like that, and the show wasn't that. I think this show is going to be more like that, because already episode 1, seeing Tom and Owen's chemistry together and how their characters are so opposite. Like, I think Falcon and Winter Soldier have more in common than Mobius and Loki does, you know? I think seeing how Loki's coming from this place of, I'm a god, I'm high grand stature, I don't have time for this peasant stuff. And Mobius like, yeah, sure, okay, buddy. Anyways, like, I think that's going to really lead to some really great humorous moments as well. I think it's really great. It's two very opposite characters put together can lead to some really great moments. And the chemistry between the two is great as well. Kind of all I got to say. It's also the most Marvel-y show I think we've seen yet. Don't you reckon? From the get-go.
I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier still holds that, especially that first episode with the helicopter scene and all that stuff.
That is a great scene.
I think that was the one that most kind of like, yeah. But this is the one that I'm most interested in seeing now. WandaVision definitely gave you, if you compare like all three of the premieres, WandaVision definitely gave me that, like, I'm so intrigued, I'm so excited. But I don't think that first episode gave me enough breadcrumbs. Like, if I wasn't a Marvel fan, I'd just kind of like be like, what the fuck is this kind of thing?
Yeah.
but I think this first Loki episode gave me more than enough breadcrumbs to be satisfied, because I also think that the episode number in this season, which is 6, definitely benefits. It's making use of the limited screen time that they have.
Yeah, and now that they've got so much exposition and so much setup out of the way, it's just exciting to see what they're going to do now, because they got a lot of shit. They got a lot of the the house cleaning done, the housewarming stuff done. It's kind of cool to go, okay, what happens now? So I guess we'll find out. Moving on though, let's get into some trailers. We mentioned this a few weeks ago. Reminiscence. Am I pronouncing that right? Reminiscence.
You tell me. You tell me.
You know what? If it's not right. If it's not, that is the way. That's its new name. I've just started right now. And yeah, I think we interviewed. Is it Han Soto, who's in this film as well with Hugh Jackman?
Yep.
What do you think of this trailer so far, man? What do you think?
Yeah, the trailer looks good, man. It looks like exactly what I'm into. It's directed by Lisa Joy, who did Westworld. She co-created Westworld with Jonathan Nolan. But this looks really original. It looks really inspired. Visually it looks gorgeous. Hugh Jackman is amazing. Rebecca Ferguson is, always amazing as well. I think, the trailer gives us just enough of what I need in terms of like setting and tone and what kind of like intensity everything is, action sequences, whatever. I have no idea what to make of it in terms of like where the story's going, which is the best thing that a trailer can do, is intrigue me and not tell me what it is or where it's going. But yeah, like I'll be there day one for this for sure. Absolutely.
I love the music and editing towards the end of this trailer. The dun, dun, dun,
yeah.
or the I don't know what you call it, but there's this new thing we're seeing in trailers now where they have a bunch of like rhythmic sounds, usually with people loading guns or clipping belts or whatever. I'm loving this trend, and it's done. This is one of the best ways I've seen it done. This movie looks fun, man. The concepts, I don't know, I'm getting sort of, I don't want to say Inception vibes, but sort of maybe. But this is a bit more like, I'm getting a vibe like this might be like a neo-noir type thing. Like it seems like the Hugh Jackman will be doing like a voiceover narration for a lot of it. Might be, I don't know, maybe, I don't want to say Blade Runner, but that type of neo-noir-esque sort of vibes to it. It's kind of cool. It's not what we see a lot of. Look, I think Hugh Jackman is the type of actor, when I see him on a screen, he's the type of guy I look at and I'm like, this guy read the script and made a lot of decisions in his head before he said anything to it. Like he's very rarely in terrible movies. So that alone gets me excited. I think this movie has a lot of potential. I think it could be a lot of fun. And I'm just really curious about how they pace it out. Like, I think it's going to be a bit of a, like sort of a detective-y sort of vibe. I think that's what you get with noir. Yeah, this looks like a blast. I think I'll also be there day one.
Cool.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to know what to expect from it other than, yeah, this looks good. What else do we got today? We've been smashing through this, man. Are we already up to reviews? I think we are. Let's get into reviews, shall we? Ladies and gentlemen, we saw The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It.
This is Ed Warren, here with Lorraine. All right, let's get started.
Residents of Brookfield were shocked this afternoon by the broad daylight murder of Bruno Sauls.
The court accepts the existence of God every time a witness swears to tell the truth. I think it's about time they accept the existence of the devil.
It was pretty boring, to be honest. I'm just gonna straight up, I think, put that on Front Street. Not because it's not James Wan directing, but I think I was more excited to see the court case behind this. Well, I mean, think about it, right?
No, you're right.
The actual case itself is more exciting than what Lorraine and goddamn, what's his name? Fuck, what's the guy's name? Whatever, the Warrens.
The Warrens.
Yeah. So like I'm just like, I want to see more of that. Can we get back? Because the actual case is called the Devil Made Me Do It case. And I wanted to see how, like, what evidence was presented and what things were defended, and like how they eventually managed to get this down to a manslaughter and only had him spend 5 years in jail, because it was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah, that's what stood out to me when the text came on screen and said he did 5 years for manslaughter. I was like, whoa, did I miss something? Like, so yeah, they leave out a lot.
Everything that the Warrens are doing as well, all of like, whatever they're uncovering, I'm just like, this isn't evidence that you can like bring up in the trial, so I don't know how it helps the guy. Like, so it's just kind of like a Conjuring story that's just unfolding while there's a more interesting story being told somewhere else. And each time we kind of cut over to the Warrens, and like, I like the Warrens. I think Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga are amazing actors.
Fantastic.
They work really well together in all three of these movies. Even this one, they're really good together. It's just, I think the story just didn't hold up like the last two did. Like the Enfield haunting and the second one was just absolutely mind-blowing. Like, it was shocking, like that whole poltergeist story. And the way that James Wan, because I did miss James Wan's direction in this one. Like, there was a lot of things missing that Michael Chavez just can't pull off. Even though he tried and there were some effective moments, it was just still like, I'm over this. I'm good. I'm over this. There's nothing about this that separates it from Annabelle or the Curse of La Llorona or the Weeping Woman, wherever you are in whatever part of the world. It's different titles. Because the two Conjuring movies feel special and they feel heavy. That kind of like really differentiates them from the rest of the franchise. But this was just kind of like, we're doing more of the same thing, and it just kind of like ended up being a bit. I don't know. I'm over this. There's just more interesting things happening somewhere else.
Welcome back to Legal Eagles, where Zoheb brings in his legal reviews. What is the legal realism for this game? No, look, man, I do think the waterbed scene was pretty cool. It wasn't mind-blowing.
It lasts like a couple of seconds. No, like it doesn't even last a minute, right?
I think it's a cool concept. I think in execution, I would have liked to see a bit more. I think the opening scene was probably the best, with the attempted exorcism. Look, man, here's the biggest disappointing thing for me. I thought it was pretty cool, and then afterwards I did some research, like which part was real. The first scene, supposedly, the court case, and then after they go to court, everything's bullshit. The whole woman putting a witch curse on them, the witch putting a curse on them, all that stuff, the cliff. It's like, wow, the thing about the Conjuring movies is it's like they're based on real people, there's facts, but when you're that light with what you do adapt already in a genre movie, already in a horror movie, which already people aren't going to believe, you're not really doing yourself a service by falsifying so much stuff, which already you're going to exaggerate. Look, I also miss James Wan. This does feel a bit cheaper than the others. I was also disappointed by the lack of the court stuff. But yeah, like I said, I thought the opening exorcism scene was really good. I thought the waterbed scene was a good idea. And I'm gonna say this. I really, really like the fact there was a human villain. I think that really helped me feel like there were some stakes there. So, because the Conjuring movies, I know the other two are better. I know they're better directed. I love my James Wan. I love that boy. But I don't know, something about like these, the spiritual demons, both movies are kind of confined to the one location. It kind of gets a bit stale for a bit. So I kind of liked with this one that they mixed it up a little bit. They moved around a bit more. They did some stuff. We had a villain that was less scary, but more tangible, I guess. And I think that was interesting. It just also felt more bullshit. It did feel cheaper. And to really put the nail in the coffin, the ending, they really had a Martha moment at the end, didn't they? with the whole "remember I love you." It's like, come on, man, that's the most generic way to end a movie or a TV show or a CW show. That's like CW writing right there. I really expected more from the Conjuring franchise in that regard. But overall, I got to be honest, I had a good time. I enjoyed it. I know it wasn't as high class as the other two films, but I did have a good time. I did enjoy it. You know, did I like it as much as Quiet Place Part 2? Nah. But I still had a good time. I wasn't bored. It's definitely not like the fucking Nun or one of those shitty Annabelle spin-offs. This was like one of the better Conjuring World movies, that, for the exception of the James Wan ones. And that wraps up my thoughts. Anything else you want to put on that?
Not really, man. I think even James Wan has moved on from this franchise. So, like, I don't know. I'm not that particularly interested in seeing another one. And like, you know, I think, you know, I watched Hereditary again last night for the first time in a long time. There's something about it, kind of like really made me realize that there's something about all these like Conjuring movies that feel kind of samey, you know, outside of the first two. And I get that what they're doing, they're trying to create a universe, so they all have to kind of like have the same sort of feel. But like, you couldn't ask me, or you couldn't pay me rather, to tell you which scare was in each movie. Like, I couldn't tell you. If you picked out a random scare, I'd be like, I have no idea which one that's from, because they all look and feel similar. So I don't really know. You know, like I think there's definitely a lot more inventive horror movies out there. I just think that these kind of like became really famous because James Wan was just able to knock it out of the park with that first Conjuring movie. Did it again the second time, and then, you know, went on to create that universe. But, and like, you know, props to him for creating a universe. Like, you know, it's not the first time he did it after Saw, but like, it still starts to feel a little samey. And I urge everyone out there to go and look out for, you know, other different kind of horror movies. These are not the only horror movies to exist, or the scariest or anything like that. So, yeah, look into A24, I think.
Yeah, I think like even the Insidious movies feel like they're from the Conjuring universe, because I just feel like we've gone through this situation of you've done really well with one or two and you want to replicate it. And the weirdest thing is, this is probably one of the most successful cinematic universes there ever has been. Like, you got Marvel, and then maybe if you want to count DC, like, no, actually count DC. They've got some solid flicks in there. And then you got this, and weirdly, it's really consistent, but it's consistent to a point where it feels like it's on a conveyor belt. Like you said, you can take a scare out of one movie, put in another. It's kind of the same. Most of them have, whenever the Warrens aren't there, the protagonists are pretty forgettable. It does seem weird, like a weird choice of a franchise to turn into a cinematic universe, but it kind of has worked. But we don't need a new one every year. Let's move on. Let's get another franchise. I would love to see I think slashers would work way better in the cinematic universe style. That's me personally. Moving on though, the MDF game. What is the MDF game this week, my friend?
So this week's MDF game is kind of an interesting one, and it comes from Green Room member Jose Rivera. So thank you so much, Jose. He kind of wanted us to talk about what our favorite cult films were. And, you know, anyone who's kind of like, anyone who hears the word cult movie, they immediately kind of like, all right, what does that really entail? Because I asked you this question and I knew the next question would come up, would be like, what's the definitions here? Right? Yeah. Like, I was like.
And it's movies about cults, right? I think we can all agree on that. No one?
So, okay. Hereditary. But anyway, so look, what's your favorite cult classic film, rather? So basically, the definition of this is that a cult classic is a film that is considered to be one of the best of its kind by a small group of people. And like, when it comes to film, I think it's necessary to include the word relatively small group of people, because I mean, obviously, there's probably millions of people who like. There's probably millions of people who like The Room, even though it's not, you know, generally considered to be a terrible movie that everyone doesn't like, right? I mean, it's still a cult film because millions of people around the world love it, but they are definitely in the minority. So with that being said, I mean, like, this is not really something that we can guess, right? Because there's just so many of them. So I'm just going to run through the poll first because we put up a poll and then we can talk about our own picks. So all right. I put up a few options and I just asked everyone else to add their own. The one that won is one that I kind of in hindsight should not have put in because I don't think it's a cult film. But Pulp Fiction. It's not a cult film. It was kind of like it was on a list and I saw it and I was like, I think it can scrape in because it didn't win Best Picture and it wasn't understood by the Academy or even cinema. Like back when it came out, like it was just kind of one of those movies that were like, that's a weird movie. Everyone likes it, but it's not going to get the recognition it deserves by the Academy. So it was instead overlooked and, Forrest Gump ended up getting the Best Picture. But I think, it was commercially successful. It was looked at the time pretty heavily favorably. So I don't really put that up there, but I think the next...
Oh, like I said, I think what kind of makes it a cult film is the fact that it's got such a dedicated, passionate fan base, and it's not like it's a franchise. Like there's no Pulp Fiction 2. So the people who love it...
Thank God.
It was made in 1995, and you still see people wearing Pulp Fiction shirts. That's kind of crazy to see people wearing a t-shirt of a film that came out in 1995. It's not like Jurassic Park where there's like 4 or 5 others. So when you see other ones on the list like Shawshank Redemption, which is also, or Big Lebowski, which is really celebrated, it's like when you call it a cult film, it's like, I get it, I guess. I get it. There's a dedicated fan of people that like it.
So the next couple options were pretty on point. So Blade Runner, the 1984 Blade Runner, was not well received when it came out in cinemas. And I don't think, from memory, I don't think it did well either. Yeah. It was kind of like trashed by critics, and it wasn't until later that it really began to pick up its following. And that was, that was because of word of mouth. That was because people walked around and were like, hey, that's a fucking great movie. That's got a lot going for it. Donnie Darko is another one that was way up there in the polls. If you haven't seen that, I highly recommend checking it out. It's Jake Gyllenhaal, very early Jake Gyllenhaal. And it absolutely deserves its cult status. It's a mind bender. The Rocky Horror Picture Show, absolutely. American Psycho is absolutely a cult film. It's one of those movies that just gets talked about because it's taboo, because it deals with things that are just so out there and taboo and rude to speak about, and they can kind of get cringed on. The book is even more fucked up. They keep it behind a counter here. So in Sydney, if you go to buy this book, you can't buy it from the shelves. It's behind the counter, which is wild, which is how I bought it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. The Big Lebowski, of course, the Coen Brothers classic, is absolutely a cult film. Clerks, absolutely. I mean, that's
especially the first one. Yeah.
It's got a small following, but successful following. Napoleon Dynamite, Shawshank Redemption, absolutely. That wasn't, I don't think financially that did well, Bad Taste. I want to say Bad Taste is the Peter Jackson one. I'm going to look it up.
Bad Taste. I think it's the one he made before Brain Dead.
Yes, it
is. Yep. That's a film I've never seen, but I've seen posters of it and pictures everywhere.
Yeah. The Thing, absolutely, completely misunderstood when it came out. Princess Bride. I mentioned The Room, Dazed and Confused, The Evil Dead, A Clockwork Orange, Streets of Fire. Heathers is a fucking wild movie. If you haven't seen Heathers, that was added by Patrick Harrington. Office Space is another one, dude. That I was like, that is yes, absolutely. I love Office Space. Scarface is an interesting pull by Patrick because I think I'll need to look it up, but I think Scarface didn't do too well.
Look, with Scarface, it's another one. You see people wearing t-shirts. You see people wearing. It's a popular film among a certain amount of people. Kids these days growing up probably aren't going to say it's their favorite film, but there's a huge dedicated fan base to Scarface, and it's not like there's Scarface 12. Yeah.
Well, all right. I'm gonna read a couple comments. Do you have your picks? Have you?
Yeah, sort of. I don't love my pick, but I'm gonna go with it.
All right. What do you got?
Oh, I'm gonna say The Room because The Room's cult.
Okay. How did I not see that coming? I should have guessed this.
Well, I kind of tying it with the second one, but with The Room, I would not say it's the best of its kind. I would not put it to that definition exactly, but when I think of a cult film, I think of a film with a passionate fan base, and that's one of the funnest films you can see. If you can see it and never watch it by yourself, it'll be shit, but you watch it with a group of people who are throwing spoons at the screen, it is so much fun. And a lot of the cult classics that we consider cult classics are not films I grew up with, because I kind of got into movies, a bit later in life, because my folks weren't big movie buffs. But I'm going to tie it with a pick maybe people wouldn't call a cult classic, but I think it should be considered, and that's Kung Pao Enter the Fist. I think it is one of the most niche films I've ever heard of, but when I meet someone who's seen that movie, the next 45 minutes is quoting that film. For those who don't know, it is a 1970s Chinese Hong Kong martial arts film, overdubbed by American actors with CGIing a person in there. And the funniest parts aren't even the parts that happen. It's like the noises in the background. I think it's what I would consider like a good example of like a very niche audience, because the people who love that film fucking love it. I haven't seen it since a kid. I don't know if it's aged well, but yeah, I'm going to tie that with The Room.
Okay, well, seeing as you got 2 picks, I'll take 2 picks as well.
Okay.
So this is one that we're going to cover soon on the podcast, actually. A 2011 film starring Ryan Gosling, directed by Nicholas Winding Refn, called Drive. I think Drive is incredibly underseen, but it also has a really strong following. It always pops up on Twitter. It always pops up on Facebook. There's always, the scorpion jacket. You always see imagery about it. It's an absolutely fantastic film with a great cast. It's really really violent, like ultra violent. And it's absolutely amazing. It's very artistic as well. That's
speaking
my
of
first
that,
pick. Yeah.
Just bringing that up. When we did the interview for Willy's Wonderland, the director we spoke with, was talking about cult films like Evil Dead and also Drive. Like, one of the first things he was saying, like, how iconic is that scorpion jacket?
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah. My second pick is one that I intentionally left off the poll because I wanted to see if anyone would add it, but they didn't, and I'm disappointed with you after party members. There's a movie called Wet Hot American Summer, and
yes,
it got a Netflix revival series. I think it got 2. But the movie is amazing, and so is the Netflix revival series. But, this is a movie, if you made it now, you couldn't afford it. Young Paul Rudd, young Amy Poehler, young Bradley Cooper, young Elizabeth Banks, young Michael Showalter. This is young Christopher Maloney. Like, holy shit. But this is a comedy. I really want to rewatch this now. I as soon as we're probably done, I'm gonna go fucking rewatch it after I make dinner or some shit.
It's an odd one, yeah.
It is the comedy in it is just so screwball, but it's the kind of comedy that reminds me of the Naked Gun movies or the Scary Movie 3 and 4, where it's just kind of so off kilter and really weird, but it's absolutely hilarious. So yeah, look, if you haven't seen Wet Hot American Summer, I highly recommend it. It's definitely got a cult following. It pops up in film Twitter, Reddit boards, wherever. But yeah, it's incredibly zany, highly meta. Check it out.
I just want to mention it because everything you said describes this film as well. Hot Rod. It's not my type of. I don't know. It's never been a film I've loved, even though I am a big Sandberg fan. But the people who love Hot Rod fucking go crazy about it. It bombed like crazy in the box office. But yeah, that's a weird one too. But super hardcore fan base that film has. Anyways, guys, that finishes us up for this week. Yay! This has been a very. We've really tried to speed through this one. Sorry about that, guys. Hope it wasn't too obvious, but we enjoyed every second of it. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, give us a 5-star review on iTunes. Be sure to be a member of the Green Room for bonus exclusive content by signing up to our Patreon. Also, give us a like, follow, share on every social media account you can think of, and we will love you forever with a big hug and kiss. Like Zoheb said, the next feature presentation will be Drive. Drive will be a fun episode, I'm sure. Make sure to check it out when you get a chance.
That's actually not true.
Not true?
Sorry, it's not your fault. It's not your fault because we posted about it on the after party today, but there was a bit of a snafu because our guest for that particular episode, Matt Anderson, pushed the episode back, and I didn't have it down in my calendar. So that's going to happen after the next feature presentation, which is this weekend, which is The Lost Boys, the Joel Schumacher film. Obviously, that's Colin's pick because it predates me and my life.
Haven't we already done that?
Yeah.
No? Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you just heard, Zoheb is a dirty, rotten liar, and you should not trust a single word he says. But besides that, that is us here for this week at Midnight Double Feature. We love you so much. Give your mum a kiss on the cheek for me. I'm Matt. That's Zoheb. Laters.